Hello everybody and welcome to week 3. You officially made it through our first week of real content in the class. So you should be looking for some feedback on your discussion posts from last week pretty soon into the beginning of this week. Please pay attention to that. You'll want to go in and read any feedback that I gave you in the threads of your discussions as well as in the grade book. When you click on your grade, you'll be able to get my feedback about your posts. So you want to make sure to do that. That way, going into this week's posts, you know if you did anything wrong or areas for improvement or if you're right on track. So please make sure that you do that. We are going to be covering chapter 2, which is social cognition this week. So here is your to-do list that I will typically give you. Kind of outlining and detailing all the important things you should be focusing on. Just to kind of overview it really quick, and then we'll go through the objectives. I have put the PDF of chapter 2 on here for you. I know some of you are still straggling on your textbooks, but this is the last PDF that I will post for you, so you need to make sure that you have those books. And if you do not, you can use the book that I put on reserve in the library. So you can check that out for a certain hour period and use it and photocopy if you'd like. Otherwise, make sure that you have your textbooks. So there's chapter 2, the lecture slides that go along with chapter 2. And I always recommend printing out the slides so that you can have them right next to you as you're going through the reading. You can highlight and then you can jot down notes in the margins just to see where the overlap is between lecture and then the textbook. Writing down examples and things like that is very helpful. Here's the additional article reading. So again, in addition to chapter 2, you're also reading this article 9, and it has to do with pluralistic ignorance. That's the topic, and it goes right along with what we'll be covering in this chapter on social cognition. So you're going to do all your reading first, and then you'll be going ahead and ready to start your discussion. So the discussion question is here. You're just going to click on here to start your thread. And as a reminder, you're posting an original response to this question. And when you do that, you want to support your ideas and support anything that you say by citing examples from not only the article, but also chapter 2 of the textbook, because chapter 2 covers a lot of the context and gives you the content, different concepts that are going to come up that help explain pluralistic ignorance. Like, why do we do this? What is wrong with this type of thinking? You're going to want to use some of the material that's in chapter 2 to help explain it. So chapter 2 is going to give you lots of concepts about our cognition. Okay, so it's all about our thinking, why we think the way that we do, errors we make in our thinking, and that's going to be good stuff to use to support your answers here. So I would expect to see a lot of integration of your citing and using that content to bridge what you're reading in the text, what's in the lecture slides, and then being able to spit that back out in your answers to these questions. Don't forget that as you're citing your sources, if you're having trouble with that, you can go into the Start Here menu, and I have the Cite as You Write document is in there, which will help you to know how to cite your sources as you're using them. So please take advantage of that. You want to make sure you're doing that correctly. This is the week where I'll actually start zoning in on and pinpointing more errors that students are making. So you want to make sure your formatting is correct. You want to make sure that when you're responding to other people, you're doing it as this is your written work. Okay, so you want to steer clear of responses that sound like more of a text message. These are written, graded responses as though you were writing them on paper and turning them in. So you want to be thorough, you want to cite your sources, you want to show off what you know from the reading so that it's really clear to me that you understand the material and all the concepts, okay? So that's your discussion. And then this week you actually will have your first exam, and it's going to cover chapters 1 and 2. And I think I say that back up here. And it closes by the 22nd. So just make sure you leave yourself plenty of time to work on that. You probably don't want to start the exam at 11:30 on the 22nd because the exam's only 30 minutes. It's going to give you 30 minutes, and when you reach the 30 minutes, it's going to time you out and it's going to shut down. So if you're not finished with the test, it will close you wherever you are and you won't be able to finish. So don't cut it too close to the due date time and you're good to go. A great way to study for that test would be by using the Revel resources that come alongside your eText. So you have access to all those Revel resources. There's practice tests, quizzes. These are really good practice for you for that test. And also the cool thing about Revel is as you're taking a quiz or a test, when you finish, it'll not only tell you how you did, but it'll also tell you where you need to improve. So if there were certain concepts that you were struggling more with, it'll direct you to where to go in the textbook for more help with those specific concepts. So it's just super useful, okay? Those tests in Revel are not the ones I grade. They're just for you to use as a practice. So I don't look at them except to maybe see how many people are actually using them. They're not graded or anything like that. The test that you're taking is here in Plato, and it's this. When you click into here, it will begin your exam and you will start there. Okay, you have to complete the exam in one whole sitting. So definitely make sure you're in a location that has Wi-Fi that's not going to go out on you, and that you're, ready to go. Maybe even have a backup plan if for some reason your computer should fail. Once you click in the exam, you must complete it in one sitting. You can't stop it and come back to it. It's timing you. So you have 30 minutes to complete the exam. It's 30 questions, multiple choice. And so pretty straightforward. And if you were taking this test in class, it would pretty much be the same. I believe when I teach it in class, I give 50 questions and students have 50 minutes. It is closed notes and closed book. And I have no way of monitoring that except the honor system, but I will tell you, if you try to use notes and try to use your book, you're going to eat up your time. Okay, so if you're having to look up concepts or look up definitions, it's really going to eat into your time, and you may not finish the test. So please don't do that, and you should be good. So that wraps it up. Let's go back up here to the objective. So this is kind of an overview of what you'll be covering in chapter 2. A couple people asked, should I be answering these and turning these in? The answer is no. These are really meant to guide you, and so I always like to have students use this as a study guide. So I've told students that you can cut and paste these into a Word document, leaving space in between each, and then as you're going through the textbook and you come across, each element or each content area, you can go ahead and write your answers in there. And so then by the time you're done, you've read the chapter and you have a nice kind of grid of all the key concepts that you should know and be able to understand for the test. Now, you want to steer clear of simplified sorts of answers, so you want to make sure your answers are complete. Some of these questions or points require you to have a multi-layered answer. So it might require you to explain a model or the steps in something. or you might have several examples to answer one question. So just make sure you're being thorough as you're going through these. But basically in this chapter, we're going to be looking at overall what is meant by social cognition. What are some of the basic assumptions that social psychologists have with respect to cognitive processes. And you're going to be starting off looking at the ways in which we organize information. One of those being the use of schemas. How do schemas function? What's the basic purpose behind them? And what kinds of processes do we use cognitively as we're putting schemas into effect in our day-to-day lives and in understanding our social world? How might schemas be altered in the face of new information? So can we adjust our schemas as we go? So that's kind of like, it'll take you through all that. You'll be talking a little bit about heuristics, help to form the base of schemas. But there's obviously some drawbacks, some consequences of using heuristics. They're basically shortcuts, sort of mental shortcuts, and they can put us in error in our thinking, and there can be consequences behind that. So understanding that and looking at the different types of heuristics that we use. I'll also talk a little bit about self-fulfilling prophecy, as being a way of thinking that can actually make a behavior come about. We have a certain set of expectations or standards in our head of how we think things should go, and oftentimes we leak that information onto others, and we bring about the very outcomes that we were expecting. And so we'll talk about that, especially in regards to classroom environment. So here's where all my teachers who are taking this class might be super interested in how this applies to classroom environment. We'd be looking at some different examples of heuristics, priming, automatic versus controlled processing, and then getting into some of the biases that we have in our thinking due to the use of some of these heuristics and different kinds of schemas that we employ. So we'll take a look at the different biases that are outlined in your textbook and how each is used and can lead you astray and what the consequences would be behind those. The latter part of the chapter looks a little more now at cognition and its relation to mood and general well-being. How can our feelings or our mood affect our cognitions, or vice versa? What is effective and non-effective ways of kind of meshing the two, and looking at the processing of social information as it is influenced not only by our thoughts but also by our moods. We often like to think that we think everything through very thoroughly, but that's not always the case. We can be led by emotion and we can be influenced by our affect. So the latter part of the book really focuses on those types of ways, and it'll bring into play some of what was talked about earlier with errors that we can make that are similar to those discussed earlier with heuristics and such. So that kind of gives you a little overview of the chapter. And again, if you have questions, as students have been having things that pop up, please let me know. Please email me and I'll try to respond as quick as I can. You can also ask each other questions. If you go into the communications tab and you go to Student Lounge, that's a place where you can talk with one another. So if you have questions for each other, or you want to set up study groups, or meet up to quiz each other, that's all a great place to have that as a resource to be able to link up with one another. And I definitely encourage it. It's very helpful to study with other people and talk about the material out loud. Is a great way to study. So good luck this week, and let me know if you have any questions.